This case was so crazy, it was almost hard to believe. A stripper, a sugar daddy, a hitman, sex, money, greed, and lie after lie after lie.
It appeared she was a wholesome housewife.
By all indications, I mean, their life looked almost perfect.
Little did they know she was a stripper at a place called Knockers, going by the name Risika.
She ended up becoming very promiscuous.
You could tell she was lying because her lips were moving.
911, where's your emergency?
Something's happened. Something bloody.
He comes outside the house and he's armed with a gun.
She's actually covered in blood.
Apologizing over and over again. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
So now they gotta go into the house. They know there's something in the house. Something bad. Something dark.
The murder was so heinous.
It's one of the bloodiest, goriest, most horrific scenes you can imagine. Marissa Suzanne Reese DeVault grew up in a beautiful place called Lake Havasu in Arizona. It's a very pretty place, very scenic, and not far from Phoenix.
She came from a childhood that was rather dysfunctional.
Her mom was a moody alcoholic who abused her severely. She would whip her with belts, pull her hair, and make her stand in the corner for hours on end. And it gets worse. When she turned 12, her stepfather started to sexually abuse her.
There was really no father figure around for her to really look at, you know, how to live a good life with a good man. She had no skills in that area.
She learned to lie and use sex to get what she wanted, and what she wanted the most was attention from men. Fortunately for her, her boyfriend in high school was this great all-American guy, Dale Harrell.
Marissa meets Dale actually in high school. She's a freshman, he's a senior. But her life really is in disarray. I mean, her life is really all over the place at this point. I look at Dale and he's got everything going for him. He's popular, he's smart.
They dated for a couple of months, but when he graduated high school, he went to trade school to become an air conditioner repairman.
Dale was ambitious. He was tall and handsome. Everyone in town knew that Dale was going to be something. He was very smart, and he set himself up after college. He went to trade school and found success in business. After high school, Dale and Marissa lost touch.
Dale Harrell graduated and moved on to trade school, while Marissa DeVault, 3 years his junior, was still completing high school. She continued living in an abusive environment with her parents. As their lives moved in different directions, DeVault and Harrell ended their relationship and began to see other people.
She ended up becoming very promiscuous and had sex at a young age.
Marissa was called derogatory and degrading names like slut and tramp by her mother all through her childhood, and so she had low self-esteem. And as she grew older, that low self-esteem resulted in those names becoming a reality.
There's no authority figure at home or really no parenting going on, and she becomes pregnant. The problem with that is she has no idea who the father is.
It's like her life was going great when she was with Dale in high school, but then after they graduated and he went off to trade school, they lost touch and her life really started to go south. So it's very fortuitous that they met years later and reconnected.
So in 1997, Dale and Marissa hook up again. They reunite.
It had been 5 years, but there was this strong sexual attraction between them. So 6 months later, when Dale was offered a job, he asked Marissa and her 2-year-old daughter, Rhiannon, to move in with him.
Dale Harrell's career moves the couple to a new city, Gilbert, Arizona, just 30 minutes outside of Phoenix. Dale's career flourished as an air conditioner repairman working in the sweltering desert heat of southern Arizona. Marissa, however, struggled to gain traction in any one career, often hopping from job to job.
Gilbert is a very much a bedroom community, quiet suburb on the outskirts of Phoenix, Arizona. Lots of families. It's a place where people go to raise their kids. They work in the city. They go back to Gilbert for their homes.
His career is starting to really take off, and that's his focus. Whereas she is kind of not doing anything. I mean, she has no goals, no dreams. They talk about marriage, but then they don't talk about marriage.
While Marissa was very much in love and wanted to get married, Dale remained focused on his business and wasn't ready for that.
Finally, they do marry, and they have kids together. And Marissa still has that child from high school, so they have a really large family. Dale's making good money. Marissa believes she's living the quintessential middle-class life.
They seem like a really nice young family. Marissa and Dale had a lot of friends in common. He was very successful. He seemed to be an accomplished man that was on his way up and providing a very nice lifestyle for him and his wife and his kids.
They had money, and by all indications, I mean, their life looked almost perfect.
Marissa wasn't really the stay-at-home type, so she started working for a real estate investor named Alan Flores. They found that they needed some help around the house and someone to look after the children, so they asked an old high school friend to move in with them.
Stanley Cook, who is someone they both knew in high school. Stanley's having a bit of a rough go in life. He got in a motorcycle accident, and he's having these psychological and brain issues, really, from the accident, where his memory is really out of whack. But, you know, they open up their home and their heart to him, and he moves in.
This wasn't the first time they'd opened their doors to a friend in need. They had a similar arrangement in the late 90s with a friend named Amy Dewey. Now, when Amy got back on her feet, she moved out, so they made a similar arrangement with Stanley Cook. Stanley was this brilliant computer software technician, but he'd hit a truck while driving his motorcycle, and his brain was kind of fried.
He was slow and had difficulty holding a full-time job. Because of his brain injury, Stanley had difficulty with memory and remembering things.
Stanley starts to help out around the house. He helps out with the kids. He helps out with some of the chores. He doesn't work, obviously. It's kind of a strange situation, but it seems to be working for the three of them.
And then, in the middle of the night, less than a month after Christmas in 2009, Marissa calls 911.
Where's your emergency? Hello?
Help! Please help!
What's going on? Ma'am, what's going on? Ma'am?
So dispatch calls her back. Marissa answers. Dispatch says, "What's going on?" She's crying, she's frantic, and she says, "My husband is trying to hurt me."
How is he trying to hurt you? Ma'am? I have the police on the way. Where is your husband right now? Is he in the room with you?
Marissa calls back, and this time she's in hysterics and screaming and yelling and saying things like, "He's trying to hurt me, he's trying to kill me, he has a hammer in his hand," and then she hangs up.
911, where's your emergency?
They're here. Are they coming?
Ma'am, is this Marissa? Marissa, I need you to try to calm down for me, okay? Ma'am, I have the police who are on the way. Okay, they should be there any second. What I need you to do is to just take a breath for me and try to calm down, all right? Where is he right now? What room are you talking about? He's in the bedroom? Where are you? Ma'am?
When police arrive at the scene, Marissa's standing outside her house, covered in blood.
When I think of that, I think of, like, the movie Carrie. That scene where the bucket of blood falls on her. This is what you're seeing. And as soon as they arrive, she's going crazy. And Stanley comes out of the house.
What police see is this rumpled-looking guy, confused, wearing a blood-soaked t-shirt.
They want to talk to him, and they do a quick search and find he's packing a pistol. So they detain him. I mean, why does he have a pistol? So now they got to go into the house. They know there's something in the house. Something bad. Something dark.
2 police officers had arrived at the scene. One officer remained outside with Marissa and Stanley, while the other slowly entered the unlit residence with his gun drawn.
They find Dale naked in his bedroom, covered in blood, severely injured, but still alive.
It was horrific. It was like a scene you couldn't unsee. Dale was bleeding everywhere. It was like that bedroom scene from Nightmare on Elm Street. Dale was bleeding so much that when they loaded him into the ambulance, blood was dripping from underneath the door.
As Dale is rushed to the hospital, Marissa is put in a squad car. Stanley's put in a squad car. And they begin to ask them questions. What the hell went on in that house? How did he end up naked and bloody, near death?
Police respond to a 911 call at the residence of Marissa DeVault and Dale Harrell in the small town of Gilbert, Arizona. Marissa is crying so hard she has the hiccups. After 3 frantic phone calls, she's now telling police that her high school sweetheart and her husband of 10 years was choking her and raping her until she passed out.
And that Stanley came to her defense and attacked Dale with a claw hammer.
Longtime friend and house guest Stanley Cook told police the exact same story Marissa did. He heard the commotion, he went into their bedroom, and he saw Dale strangling Marissa, so he hit him in the head with a hammer.
The stories meshed. However, investigators are wondering about Stanley. They know something's wrong with him.
He's not a very credible witness, and police aren't sure that he's qualified to give a statement.
Something seemed very off about Stanley, and in a way, there was. He had suffered a brain injury, which really impacted his cognitive abilities. He couldn't remember any details. You know, where did the hammer come from? What were they shouting about? Were they on the floor or on the bed? He couldn't remember any of that. It was like he was repeating something somebody had told him.
Marissa was taken to the hospital, too, for treatment of her injuries.
Marissa asked to be seen by a doctor because she said her neck hurt from being strangled by Dale. But when she was examined, they couldn't see anything beyond a couple of small bruises.
And because she was so hysterical, the doctors gave her a sedative. And as Marissa starts to calm down, her story changes.
And that right there is a red flag, because truth is inherent inside of you. It should never change.
When it comes to crime, police look for inconsistencies in people's stories, and in Marissa's case, they didn't have to look too far.
Marissa's story now is that she was woken up out of a sleep. Dale was choking her, demanding sex from her, getting ready to beat her, and she was terrified for her life. Then she goes into kind of a blackout. And when she comes to again, she explains, there's Stanley beating Dale with a hammer.
This isn't a kinky 50 Shades of Grey situation. Marissa is describing full-on rape here. She says Stanley kept yelling at Dale to get off of her and hitting him in the head repeatedly with a hammer until he passed out on top of her. Then she pushed him off and called 911.
The way she describes this is really like a self-defense thing. Like, as if Stanley came rushing in, saw that Dale was raping his wife, and decided to come to her rescue.
Dale Harrell sustained massive injuries from the hammer attack. His injuries included multiple skull fractures and severe blood loss. According to medical reports, the impact of the hammer left multiple visible holes in his head, one of which was the size of a softball.
He's rushed into surgery, and nobody knows if he's gonna make it. I mean, how could you survive an attack like that with a hammer?
Dale's injuries are horrific. He's got a hole in his head the size of a softball, multiple skull fractures, and he's been bleeding a long time. Police are worried that he might not make it through surgery. The doctors take him into the emergency room, but no one's sure he's going to make it.
Everyone was hanging on by their fingernails, the doctors, the police, his family. If Dale died, the truth would inevitably die with him.
Incredibly, he comes out of surgery, hours and hours of surgery, and now he's in a coma. Will he make it? Will he not make it? Will he even be able to speak? What will he remember?
Despite the massive head injuries that Dale had, he was still alive. He was even moaning and complaining about how bright the lights were inside the ambulance. Dale was young and he was strong. There was a small chance that he might survive. While police were waiting for Dale to regain consciousness and maybe give a statement, they continued to question Marissa.
Despite outside appearances of being a nice, happy couple, Marissa reveals that their marriage was anything but.
As Marissa begins to tell her side of the story, she describes a marriage that was in disarray, that was violent, abusive, that Dale really, in order to get sex from her, would rape her.
Marissa says she feared for her life and that the trouble started a few months after they got married. She says he fractured her skull and she did go to the hospital, but didn't file a police report.
If you look at their life leading up to this point, it really was kind of a white picket fence type of life. At least that's what she was telling people.
Although it's common for victims of domestic violence not to come forward, Marissa said she did tell her boss, Alan Flores. Alan was so concerned for Marissa's safety, he even gave her a gun. The same gun that police found in Stanley Cook's pocket. Marissa's relationship with Alan Flores is very interesting. Although he is her boss, she also states that he used to be in an intimate relationship with her stepfather, who's now deceased.
She injects this new person into the drama, if you will, this Flores guy, her dead stepfather's homosexual lover.
Someone who can back up her story.
When you look at Flores, you know, we're talking about a credible guy. I mean, he's got a doctorate, he went to Yale, financially independent, all-around good guy.
Investigators look at the crime scene to try and substantiate Marissa's second story, the one where she says she was lying down and Dale was over her, choking her. But investigators say, no way, The blood-soaked pillow on the bed says Dale was the one that was lying down, not Marissa.
As investigators look at the forensic side of the case and the fact that Stanley was carrying a weapon, of course, did he use the weapon? No. Was the weapon used to maybe beat Dale? No. So there's really no forensic connection between Stanley and this beating that was put on Dale. Where do you go to next?
Stanley Cook was released from custody after police investigators determined he was not a viable suspect. Marissa was brought in for questioning a third time, and according to investigation notes, she changed her story yet again.
She was put into one of those interrogation rooms, the ones you see in the movies, you know, like the one from Basic Instinct, where Sharon Stone is all dolled up in that beautiful white dress. Well, this was a little different. Marissa had no makeup on, and she was in a blue tracksuit. But one thing that remained the same was they were both lying.
You woke up to, explain it, tell me exactly what it was, and then
I woke up to this.
Okay.
And, I mean, he was bent down a little bit lower, and
Marissa said that he had been hitting her, attacking her, demanding sex.
my head was fuzzy. But I just woke up, too, so I wasn't quite sure what. But he relaxed it, and I screamed.
She claims that she woke up and he was raping her and choking her until she passed out.
You black out.
And then the next thing I see is, I saw a hammer go into Dale's head. And I kind of jumped over.
Okay, so when you wake up...
And he was heavy on me, so I couldn't get him off me, but I just did like that.
Okay.
And
when you did like that, was something still hitting him in the head?
yes, Dale had started to go limp. And then I touched him and pushed him, and that's when he rolled off the bed.
When investigators begin to really comb through the forensic evidence and look at really what science is telling them, a different narrative emerges. So they go back to Marissa and they say, look, what you've said is not adding up with the science, so we need another statement from you.
When I listen to you, it comes across to me as this is a self-defense case. But Marissa, this is your opportunity to tell me everything for me to believe it's a self-defense case.
Confronting her with the fact that her story and the blood evidence did not match made her come up with a new story that seemed a little more true.
Marissa then tells another story. And this one involves her not fighting him.
She let him rape her, and then when she went to the bathroom to clean herself up, she came back and Dale was asleep in the bedroom. Marissa said that in that moment, all the rage and abuse just boiled up in her, and she grabbed the hammer, and she was the one who attacked him with the hammer.
She says she snapped. She lost control after years of enduring abuse. She picked up the hammer and started hitting him in the head and said, "You don't own me."
And I picture it this way. She's sitting there, and she's staring in the mirror, and she's just building up this rage from all the years of abuse, and it just has to come out of her in some way. And this is when she grabs a hammer, she goes back in, and she wants to kill the guy and attacks him with a hammer. As Marissa is beating him with this hammer, all that rage, that volcanic rage coming out of her, Stanley rushes into the room, sees what's going on, and stops her. "What are you doing?"
That story matched with the forensic evidence, and Marissa was arrested for attempted murder.
She claims she attacked him. Stanley didn't. He stopped her. So the question is, was this self-defense? Can she use that abuse excuse here?
Why not? Everyone that knew Marissa and Dale are shocked by the developments. They appeared to be a happy, loving couple, and to hear the violence that took place behind the scenes, everyone is shocked by what happened.
As family and friends begin to look at this, they're overwhelmed by the violence, the blood, the attack itself. I mean, how could she go through her life with Dale and not say anything and then have it all come out at once? The investigation continues, and things are coming to the forefront. New information's coming forward. People are saying things that are not aligning with what Marissa says.
Well, wouldn't you know, Marissa's story unravels again. Young Gilbert, Arizona mom and wife Marissa DeVault is in custody as police investigate the brutal attack on her husband Dale. She's changed her story so many times that they have to keep investigating the latest version. And really, they have to go through a spider web of information.
Marissa starts claiming that, there were times when the beatings by Dale would actually send her to the hospital. She tells us one story about him dislocating her shoulder one time and a friend of hers popping it back into place.
While Marissa had these claims that there were multiple people who could back up her stories, that there was someone who once helped her fix her shoulder after Dale dislocated it, police weren't able to find anyone to verify her claims.
So, as an investigator, what do? You begin to comb through medical records, see if she's ever been in the hospital, and they find nothing. So, just another series of lies? She's building a foundation of pathological lying is what she's doing.
Dale and Marissa's friends and family claimed that they had a happy relationship and no one had witnessed the abuse. Further, her medical records never backed up her claims of abuse.
Meanwhile, 3.5 weeks after the attack, Dale is in hospice care, still in a coma, and clinging to life.
When it's clear that he's not going to be waking up, Dale's family makes the difficult decision to remove him from life support.
They pull the plug and allow him a peaceful death.
Dale succumbed to his injuries on February 9th, 2009. After his death, this was no longer considered just a brutal assault. This was now a murder. Prosecutors upped the charges from attempted murder to first-degree murder. And in Arizona, that meant Marissa DeVault was eligible for the death penalty. DeVault was initially set to go to trial in 2011, but the trial was postponed until 2014.
Marissa was taken into custody, where she would stay for the next 5 years while the case waited to go to trial.
Jury selection for the DeVault murder trial started January 2014.
When we get to the jury selection, something interesting happens.
It was 6 months after the first Jodi Arias trial and 6 months before the second, and the cases were so similar that the judge said he didn't want anyone on the jury who was following the Arias case.
The Jodi Arias trial case was huge.
Both Jodi Arias and Marissa DeVault were young, pretty women who had killed these guys in brutal ways. Because of that, the judge compared Marissa's case to Jodi Arias's case. And the judge was very concerned about anyone being on the jury that was obsessed with the Jodi Arias case.
That can taint what's going on because the cases are similar, the timing is similar, and they don't want any bias. I mean, I agree with that. Death penalty case is a big responsibility for jurors. So you got to look at all angles.
Marissa's attorney had years to prepare her defense, which stated she had battered women syndrome and post-traumatic stress disorder. While the defense had years to prepare, so did the prosecution.
The prosecutors reveal Marissa's secret past. While it appeared she was a wholesome housewife, they discovered that before she met Dale, she had worked as a stripper.
When the prosecution dropped the bomb that Marissa went by the name Reese Cup and worked at a place called Knockers, and her specialty was bachelor parties in Vegas, while everyone at the defense table went pale. The prosecution also claimed that Dale knew about Marissa's stripping, and he encouraged her to stop.
During the relationship, Dale argued that he made enough money that he could support Marissa, and so she gave up stripping to be with him.
The prosecution's goal was to expose Marissa and all of her secrets, showing that there's more to her than meets the eye. Their next step, to discredit the star witness, Alan Flores. This is the guy that she claimed was her boss and her dead stepfather's gay lover.
Alan Flores was the one witness that was going to verify Marissa's claims that Dale was abusive.
So what do you got to do as an investigator, prosecutor? You got to look into his life, and what do they find? Oh my goodness. So the dead stepfather's gay lover is also into child porn. So they find this child porn in his house on his computers. Well, you know what? Maybe he was not the guy he said he was. His credibility just went from 1,000 to 0. You can have a Yale doctorate, you can be well-educated, but he's into child porn.
And suddenly, Flores, the guy who's going to swear up and down that Dale was abusive and that's why Marissa killed him, well, now Flores is going to jail.
Alan was charged with possession of child pornography, and because of that, he made a deal where he was no longer a cooperating witness in Marissa's case.
And now, instead of testifying for the defense, Flores is going to testify for the prosecution. It was a huge flip-flop.
He asked for immunity. You know, give me immunity from the child porn, and I'll give you the goods on her.
Believe me, Marissa DeVault's lawyers were not happy about what Flores had to say.
In court, Alan confesses that he actually had met Marissa on a sugar daddy website, that he had been supplying her money in exchange for sex. The relationship between Marissa and Dale seemed to be going well until one night in the early morning hours of January 14th, 2009. Marissa makes a 911 call and says her husband is bleeding in his bed.
Dale is assaulted by someone with a hammer. Investigators question Marissa, but pinning down her story is like playing whack-a-mole. The only consistency in her stories is that Dale was abusive. It takes 5 different stories before Marissa confesses.
Dale dies. He succumbs to his injuries. So now we don't have an attempted murder here. We have murder. The stakes are way up now. Marissa's facing not only first-degree murder, she's facing the death penalty. She's set to go to trial, but it takes about 5 years before she actually sits in a courtroom.
Marissa claims that she snapped during one of Dale's frequent attacks on her. The prosecution claims Marissa is a cold, calculating killer. And then the prosecution really hits the jackpot when they get Alan Flores on the stand.
In exchange for immunity on the child pornography charges, Alan Flores agrees to testify against Marissa. And he reveals that during the course of their relationship, she had been manipulating him too. He had given her over $300,000 during the course of their relationship.
Now, when we look deeper at the Flores-Marissa connection, we see motive coming into play here, because they weren't old friends. They didn't run into each other at the coffee bar. Marissa found him on a sugar daddy website. And what does that mean? That means that he was on there willing to take care of somebody. And she steps into his life. She begins to borrow money from him.
He said that he didn't give Marissa the money and that it was a loan, and Marissa completely agreed to that arrangement. Well, now this throws Marissa under the bus.
What does that say about her? It says she didn't want to work, she didn't want to do anything. Everything becomes about Marissa.
Flores says that Marissa was in the process of inheriting this $8 million trust fund from her stepfather's estate. When police investigate, well, there is no trust fund. She was lying. Her stepfather was still alive, and he didn't have a bank account with anywhere near that kind of money.
You know, not 5,000 here or 10 there, but she's into this guy for $360,000. And guess what? There came a point where he wanted his money back.
Flores says he eventually realized that Marissa was lying and pressured her to pay him back.
So Marissa finds herself backed into a corner, and she's going to be receiving money, but how she's going to receive that money is a whole nother story.
Things were looking worse and worse for Marissa as the trial went on. She had purchased one of 2 life insurance policies on Dale just weeks before he was attacked, and she was planning on collecting $1,250,000 worth of insurance money.
Here we have 2 life insurance policies on Dale. One of them is going to be active on January 9th. And guess what? Dale's murdered on January 14th, 5 days later.
This gave motive for the crime. Marissa knew she was going to get money if Dale died because of the life insurance policy. So police believed that that was part of the motive. She needed that money to pay Alan back.
She had originally tried to pin the murder on their mentally disabled house guest, Stanley Cook, because, of course, if she's the killer, she'd miss out on the insurance payout. Nothing was what it seemed.
Marissa had become increasingly desperate. She owed Alan hundreds of thousands of dollars. He was bugging her for the money, and she had no trust that she had claimed that she had. So Marissa waited until one night when Dale was fast asleep, and she grabbed a hammer and started beating him while he was lying in his bed. Stanley came in and did stop her, and they called the police and fabricated the story. The defense presents a very different story. The defense claims that Marissa was a victim, that she had been victimized when she was a child by her mom and her mom's boyfriends, that she had grown up abused by her husband, and that she acted out in self-defense after years of being battered.
Marissa's lawyers brought in a forensic psychologist, the same one that also worked on the Jodi Arias case. Marissa had told the psychologist that Dale liked to have threesomes and watch while she had sex with other men. Well, the judge didn't want this to turn into a sleazy drama like the Arias case, so the doctor just testified that Marissa had post-traumatic stress disorder.
Psychologists are brought into this case. You know, what we see is, according to them, and the defense, is a pattern here. And the pattern is Marissa's mother abused her, physically, mentally, emotionally. And then her stepfather sexually abused her. And then what does she do? She meets this guy, he abuses her.
A clinical psychologist who taught at the University of Washington was also called to the stand by the defense. He specialized in the effects of child abuse.
Marissa is interviewed by many psychologists who all agree that she is suffering from battered woman syndrome.
So, of course, this buildup of PTSD throughout her whole life leads to that rage inside of her that ultimately just erupted.
Next up, Marissa's eldest daughter, Rhiannon. She was 13 at the time of the murder, but now this is 5 years later, so she's 18. The prosecutor asked her about her parents' relationship.
She backs up the claims that for years Marissa had been beaten by her husband, but she also admitted that she hit him back. The daughters claimed on the stand that Marissa and Dale fought often, and that she and her siblings often had to hide in the bedroom and push a dresser against the door to protect themselves. When asked if Marissa had ever hit Dale, the daughter admits yes, but not as much as Dale hit Marissa.
So, it sounds to me like there was a toxic, abusive relationship.
The psychologists on the prosecution side who evaluated Marissa determined that she has antisocial personality disorder.
Prosecution pushes back on this because they ask Marissa, at one time, you gave custody of your children to your stepfather and your mother. If they were so abusive, especially your stepfather, if he was sexually abusive, why would you allow your kids to go into that situation? It just doesn't add up. It seems that the stories Marissa tells seem to fit her narrative. Marissa's daughter is interesting on the stand because it tells me that Marissa manipulated her own child. You gotta do this for me. And it just shows that she's a classic narcissistic sociopath. You know, she's willing to manipulate her own children for her own benefit.
Marissa's case isn't perfect. It comes out that she used to be a stripper, she owes money, she had a sugar daddy, and she took out a life insurance policy out on Dale. But the defense is playing off the claim that Marissa was a battered woman, and the jury tends to be sympathetic to that sort of thing. But then another huge grenade is thrown into the proceedings. She claims PTSD due to abuse. The prosecution says Marissa is a cold-blooded killer who was out for insurance money. It comes out during the trial that Marissa was a stripper at a place called Knockers, going by the name Reese Cup. While she was stripping, she was dating a bouncer that worked there named Travis. Travis was called to the stand. He shows up to trial, 6'5", bearded, dressed in all black with a red tie. It was like something straight out of Pulp Fiction.
According to court testimony, Travis claimed he was in a sexual relationship with Marissa back in 2002. He said he liked her but couldn't deal with her compulsive lying behavior, so they broke up. They lost touch until 2009, when Marissa contacted him out of the blue.
Travis said that he agreed to meet with her, and it was at that point that Marissa asked him to take care of Dale.
He says, this was not a crime of passion. I know this because she came to me and wanted me to kill her husband for money.
Over the course of Marissa DeVault's trial, the prosecution brought many of Marissa's secrets to light, including her past as a stripper and her relationship with Alan Flores. Flores was the only witness that was coming forward to substantiate Marissa's claims of abuse, but he flipped before the defense got him on the stand. He was offered a deal to testify for the prosecution in exchange for immunity from child pornography charges, and he went on to testify that Marissa owed him $360,000.
So we have another brick on this foundation building up to prove that she is a pathological liar and that the motive here was money.
The trial lasted nearly a month, and deliberations began on April 8th, 2014.
The jury comes back and decides Marissa is guilty of the murder of her husband. It was clear that Marissa killed her husband. It came down to what would be the punishment, the death penalty or life without the possibility of parole.
The prosecution argued that excessive cruelty was involved in this crime. So her attorneys do the best they can. They argue that She suffers post-traumatic stress from being abused for so long. She didn't know what she was doing. All she did was try to protect herself. What they're trying to do, really, is save her life.
Marissa doesn't want to die, so she's pulling out all the stops. Marissa has 3 daughters begging the court to spare her life.
Often in these cases of females on trial and the death penalty is involved, you know, the children come in, and in this case, no different. Marissa's children come in and plead for mercy. They need their mother. I've seen it time and again.
Marissa makes a final statement and apologizes in front of the jury for murdering her husband.
And she kind of admits guilt in this statement a little bit, taking some responsibility. And that's what jurors on a death penalty case want to hear. They want to hear that you've taken responsibility.
The jurors decided that the murder was so cruel that she was eligible for the death penalty. The judge confronted Marissa and said that Marissa was still lying, she was still manipulating, and that if she got out of jail one day, she would still be a hindrance to her children.
The judge in this case, she says no way. In fact, what she says hammers home all of the evidence. It supports everything. She says, look, Marissa, you have no remorse. You're a danger to society, and you're certainly a danger to your children, and you will not see the light of day on your back as a free woman again.
On June 6, 2014, Marissa was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole and was sent to jail within the Arizona Department of Corrections.
Was she sorry? Had going to jail taught her anything? Was she remorseful? Marissa had refused to relinquish custody of Dale's remains to his parents. So they sued and won.
They were able to get custody of his body and chose to bury him in a location of their choosing.
You know, this is a really complicated case, and so many sordid details came out during the trial. The stripping, the hitman, the sugar daddy, the insurance money. But what this really boils down to is a wife killing her husband with a hammer in cold blood for insurance money. The truth came out.
When Patrick Gilhuley decided to end his relationship with 𝗠𝗂𝗿𝗏𝗏, he had no idea how badly she would take it.
I wish you never came over. I loved you so much.
Marriage number 1 ends in divorce. Marriage number 2 ends in divorce. Marriage number 3 ends in divorce. And each time, that heart gets more and more and more broken, and she needs a man in her life.
Can you just call my ex-husband and tell him what's going on?
Yep, everybody's been notified.
And now she has Patrick, and she is not going to let him go.
In what she claimed would be a case of kill or be killed, an ugly scene takes place. On the phone to her father, Patrick's daughter listens to an unfolding horror.
And the next thing his daughter hears is, holy blank, expletive, expletive, she's got a gun. And then 3 distinctive gunshots. It's what Patrick's daughter hears. And then the line goes dead.
She fired 6 shots, 5 of which struck Mr. Gilhuley in the back and in the hand. He came to rest at the bottom of the stairs. 2 of the shots that entered his back and exited out his chest were devastating shots. They produced substantial incapacitation, and he essentially collapsed at the bottom of the stairs.
Those 5 bullets were for those 5 alpha males in her life that rejected her and abandoned her. Her father, her first husband, her second husband, her third husband, myself, and Patrick.
I don't want to be here if he's not with me.
Criminologists agree. Men and women kill for different reasons and in different ways. When a woman murders, it's often in rage, jealousy, passion. This is the series that looks into the hearts and minds of the lady killers. Jim Faulkner is looking for love. When he comes across the dating profile of 𝗠𝗂𝗿𝗏𝗏𝗏, he can't believe his luck.
When I met her on Match.com, it said the total package, and she had a facade that she was a corporate woman, she was successful, She was vibrant. I mean, we played sports together. We could do mountain bike. We could do all these things together.
Virginia Vertitas was a bright woman. She had worked as a school teacher, and her kids really loved her. But before that, she'd actually worked for AT&T in their IT department, information technology. She decided she really wanted to help kids, so she decided to take this teaching job, and she had done that for some time.
Virginia lived in the Mount Olive area of New Jersey. Jim recalls his first date with the woman that he'd go on to marry.
We met at TGI Fridays, and we had a few drinks, a couple appetizers, and I didn't know if it was going to go anywhere from there. And I walked her to her car, and I told her it was a pleasure to meet her. And she said, "Where are you going?" She goes, "You got to give me a kiss." And she didn't hold back from there.
There was much to like about Virginia.
She made you feel like you were the only person in the room.
And it wouldn't be long before the couple became intimate.
She was a very sexual person. She knew how to get in there and get you pumped up, and I felt pretty cocky at the height of our relationship. I felt pretty like I'm the man.
As he got to know her better, Jim learned of Virginia's past.
She had revealed that when she was 7 years old, that her father, who was in the military, had abandoned her and and the family and left the state and never came back. So when she was 7 years old, and I think that abandonment followed her through, that rejection really had an impact on her.
So the psychiatric records paint a picture of this woman who was very, very dependent on having a man in her life. This was a woman who had serious issues with abandonment.
Ironically, it would be her insecurity and fear of being left that would later bring about the end of the marriage.
Well, after about the first 6 months, when the warm and fuzzies started wearing off, she said, "I have to talk to you." And she said that she wasn't feeling it, that I wasn't giving enough to the relationship. And she took a lot of trips with her kids. She said, "Oh, I'm going down the shore for the weekend. I'm going," which I, at the time, thought that was normal. So already in the first 6 months, the signs were not good.
Virginia seemed to be a woman who needed a man in her life. If one relationship was ending, she made sure another was lined up.
Virginia, through my opinion of her fear of abandonment issues, she always had to have a man on deck. When I met her second husband, she told him that she's gonna marry me. That's the man that she's gonna marry. There's your replacement.
So when her marriage to Jim began to flounder, Virginia stayed true to form.
She ended up confessing to me that she had already met somebody else on Match.com and was seeing them. And I asked her, I said, "Well, if you want to be with that person, go do so. I won't stand in your way. I'll respect it." But she said, "No, I still want to be with you."
It would become clear that Virginia had not ended the friendship.
I woke up one morning and I had my foot, I had some clothing on my toe, and I picked it up. It's a man's underwear in the bed. I said, "What the heck is this?" "Oh, that was my ex-husband's. It got mixed up with the laundry with my son." "Oh, okay." Another point in time, I wake up in the morning, and there's a man standing at the top of the bed when I open my eyes. And I said, who the heck are you?
Jim had had enough.
It was a rough period, and I wanted to end it there, and she couldn't take rejection. So when I ended it, she ended up sending 120 roses to my house. She bought me gifts and cried and put on a whole show that she didn't want to end it.
But it wasn't just one other man. Unbeknown to her husband, Virginia was back on the market.
So Virginia goes back on Match.com. She'd been there before. That's how she met her last husband, so why not try it again? So she sees Patrick Gilhuley on Match.com. She thinks he's kind of cute. So she sends him this little emoji, and they start chatting.
But she was not yet ready to come clean to her husband about Patrick.
We were still involved when she met him. So really, I said, I saw her emails about, wow, it was a good weekend. And I go, are you involved with somebody else? She goes, no, what are you talking about? I'm not involved with anybody else. What are you, nuts?
When Jim next raised the subject of her cheating, he got more than he bargained for.
I told her that if this gentleman that you're seeing is still not going away, I'm moving out. And that's... So I go to sleep, and all of a sudden, I wake up and feel a hand in my neck. And she grabs my neck and tells me to get out of her room. I can't sleep in her bed. I'm leaving. And I really felt uncomfortable and unsafe.
To Virginia, Jim was now dispensable. She'd moved on to Patrick.
They start chatting online for a while. This goes on for a few months. And then they start dating. And she's really intrigued by this guy. She really likes him.
In 2008, Jim took the decision to leave, but that meant he would be left with nothing.
I'm done. So she said, okay, I want you to sign this paper. It means I relinquish all equity, monies, finances. I just take my personal property, or my personal effects, and go. And I said, well, I don't really like your attitude right now. And she goes, if you don't sign this, I'm going to call the police and say you tried to hurt me.
Virginia 𝗿𝗏𝗃 is not a woman who likes to be told no.
I said, you're out of control right now. My son and I get in my car. I take off down the street. She runs down the street, jumps on the top of my car. The windows are open, and puts her hands and trying to be like Superwoman and lasso my car. And I pull over, I stop, she rolls off, or I help her up, and she goes, you need to come in here right now. And I go to the house, and she goes, sign that paper right now. So I didn't want any trouble, so I just signed everything away.
Now Virginia had it all: the house, the money, and more importantly, a new love interest. Just over the river in New York was retired cop and bodyguard Patrick Gilhuley.
Patrick, he enjoys life. He likes wine, women, and song. This is a guy who's done his time on the streets. He has this second career in life, protecting others, but he's also enjoying life. This is a guy who, he can do it, so he's going to do it, and he's dating women.
He had worked briefly as a celebrity bodyguard, and now he's running his own security company. And she says he's really a gentleman, and she doesn't see that a lot anymore. He opens her doors for her. She likes the way she's being treated.
But Patrick Gilhuley doesn't know the kind of woman he's getting involved with.
She always told me she had a dark side. I never knew what that dark side was, but she said she had a dark side.
That dark side was one that Patrick Gilhuley was about to discover. Fresh out of marriage number 3, Virginia 𝗿𝗏𝗃𝗃 is not in a good place. Her 16-year-old son from an earlier marriage has just given her some news.
Her son is wanting to move in with his father. She misses her daughter. Her daughter's away at college. She's worried about money. She's trying to get her old teaching job back, but so far she's gone to try to get her teaching job back, and they won't hire her.
What's more, her relationship with retired NYPD detective Patrick Gilhuley looks to be in trouble.
As time goes on, she says she starts noticing that he can be abusive, especially when he's been drinking. And Patrick does have a tendency to drink a lot and a little too often, but she claims that when he does, he kind of throws her around, and he also gets jealous.
But jealous behavior is something Virginia liked, even courted, as her ex-husband recalls.
We went out to eat, and there was a restaurant bar, and she said that one of the men grabbed her ass and told her I was an a-hole. And I said, what? And she said, he's harassing me, that man. There was a couple of instances where she was trying to get a rise from me, get my alpha male libido going, and she liked that.
Virginia viewed it differently. She portrayed Patrick as a jealous man who could lose control.
She talks about some trip they took to Las Vegas together, and she says that when he sees her at the pool chatting with a couple of guys, he gets so mad that when she comes back to the hotel room that he just shreds her bathing suit. He's just so angry, so jealous.
The relationship is on a downward spiral, and Virginia suspects Patrick of cheating.
And then she kept reaching out again. You know, she had revealed some things, that he, you know, was a chronic alcoholic and he was a nasty drunk, and he was running around with a lot of different women on Match.com, apparently.
So at one point, Virginia figures out how to sort of follow Patrick as he's opening his phone, and she figures out his passcode. So she gets into his phone, and she sees these text messages with some woman by the name of Colleen Roper. So she wants to know, who's Colleen Roper? So she goes on Facebook, and she sends this friend request to Colleen Roper. She says, I'm Patrick's girlfriend. And she says, now wait a minute, Patrick told me, Colleen says, that you two had broken up. Virginia says, broken up? We just had sex this morning.
When Patrick discovers what she's done, he's angry.
He goes wild, and he gets so angry, and he's sending her these horrible text messages, and he sends her this voicemail. And he calls her a psycho, and he says, hey, psycho, look, I am so done with you. You are such a complete psycho. It is over. I'm out of here. Good luck, psycho. So Virginia's kind of thrown for a loop here, and she's thinking, is it over? Is it really over?
For Patrick, the relationship should end, and end now, but Virginia can't handle the rejection.
This is where she starts really a serious downward spiral, and she starts obsessing on Patrick. Just obsessing. She's calling his mother.
I would definitely say she's a very manipulative person. She's narcissistic, but she also suffers depression, and she does it in a self-pity way. She always admitted that her self-esteem was very low, and I didn't see that at the time.
She was so obsessed with Patrick, so obsessed with him, that she made a picture of him, her screensaver on her phone. This is a woman who does not want to let go of this relationship.
Whilst Virginia's relationship with Patrick is certainly ending, it's not quite over yet.
See, Patrick's old school. He's not going to break up via text. He's not going to break up via phone. Because men, in Patrick's era, we do things face to face. It's the right thing to do.
Virginia is not a woman who gives up easily.
She actually told Patrick that she had MS. When the sympathy card didn't work, then she tries sex. And she's trying to lure him with pictures of her. She texts pictures of her in like sexy new lingerie and, you know, offering to him a good time. And actually, apparently, she's actually kind of portraying it as friends with benefits so that he doesn't necessarily feel like he has to commit, but we can be friends with benefits.
On March 3rd, 2014, just after 6 p.m. on a lovely spring evening, Virginia texts Patrick to come over.
Patrick originally tries to end it nicely, if there's a nice way to end a relationship with Virginia. He is going to talk to her, spend the evening. He's going to be that gentleman.
Around 7 o'clock, Patrick comes over. When he comes over, he's got a suitcase that he's returning to her because she has loaned the suitcase to him and he just wants to give it back. So they're sitting on the sofa, they're watching TV, She's wanting a little something, and she tries to have sex with him, but apparently it doesn't work. He's not able to perform.
He's watching TV with her, perhaps maybe trying to get the courage up to say, hey, it's over. But he gets a phone call, and he leaves, and he goes outside.
He's on the phone with his new girlfriend, Colleen. And he's apparently just saying to Colleen, look, I'm going to go in and just end it with her once and for all. I'm really tired of this, and I really just want to be with you, Colleen.
What happened next depends on whose story you believe. Murder by a woman, or a case of kill or be killed.
According to Virginia's story, he's so angry that he slams that storm door and breaks the glass. Comes in the house and he's belligerent.
She goes crazy. She starts yelling at Patrick.
And Patrick says, you know, look, Virginia, I'm kind of done with all this. My daughter, by the way, she thinks you're a psycho. Psycho? What? Well, at least I pay my taxes, she says. That's a hot button issue. Because as it turns out, this has been an ongoing thing between Patrick and Virginia. Virginia has been sort of threatening to turn in Patrick because he hasn't been paying taxes on his security business.
She's going to report him to the IRS for income tax fraud because she knows he hasn't reported all of his income from all of his secondary side jobs and security jobs that he has had. This sends Patrick into a rage. He's furious. He can't believe it that she's going to bring up this kind of garbage because it's been a speed bump that he thought he had already dealt with, and now she's throwing it back in his face.
And they get into this fight, and he's just really angry, upset with her. But now, here's where the stories diverge. And it depends on who you believe. So you have to follow the evidence. What happens is they are clearly in a skirmish, some kind of a fight.
What is not in dispute is that in the minutes that follow, Patrick Gilhuley will lose his life. Shot dead with his own gun. But what is the sequence of events a jury will be asked to consider?
What does Patrick do? He wants it on record. He wants somebody to hear just how crazy and irrational Virginia is. So he calls his daughter. And while he's on the phone with his daughter, explaining this play-by-play,
Patrick calls his daughter and he says, oh my gosh, you are so right. Virginia is such a psycho. She's beating me right now. She is attached. Can you hear? Stop it. She's attacking me.
His daughter can hear the screaming, the yelling that's taken place. What is going on with Virginia yelling at Patrick is confirming what Patrick's daughter already told Patrick. I think she's a nut. You need to get away from that woman. And Patrick knew that from previous conversations he had with his daughter. So what takes place? Through all this yelling that is going on, Patrick lashes at Virginia, but lashes at her verbally. And he says, my daughter told me you were crazy.
And then the phone hangs up. Then the phone rings again, and the daughter doesn't hear anything but sort of scuffling around. She doesn't hear, there's like nothing really intelligible. You can't make it. So it's probably a pocket dial. So then there's a third phone call. And by this time, what's going on in Virginia's house? By this time, Virginia's so angry. She runs. She says she's scared. She says that she sees a look in his eyes, and it terrifies her. She runs. She finds this gun under the mattress.
He's walking up the stairs, and the next thing his daughter hears is, holy blank, expletive, she's got a gun. And then 3 distinctive gunshots is what Patrick's daughter hears. And then the line goes dead.
She immediately calls 911, but guess what? She doesn't really know. She's got to find Virginia's address. Where is this place? So she's got to locate it so that the cops can get there and hopefully try to save Patrick.
Jennifer's is not the only 911 call placed that night.
In the meantime, 25 minutes later, Virginia also places a 911 call. Is it that Virginia was using this time to come up with her sinister plan? What's the explanation? How is she going to explain what took place? And in that short amount of time, she's able to put together, initially, a pretty good story.
Virginia's is a story which will include evidence that she'd been pushed around. Or had she? Interview room footage might suggest differently.
I might need to get pictures of my arms.
Sure. Okay, I'll send a detective. Can they get pictures of your arms?
Sure.
Okay.
In a New Jersey suburb, emergency services are on their way to the home of Virginia 𝗿𝗏𝗏, where they've received reports of a shooting, and the victim is one of their own. Forensic Officer Ryan Howard is amongst the first on the scene.
It was a nice neighborhood. Where the crime occurred was a nice neighborhood, residential neighborhood. The house was unremarkable for the area, but nice. It was the body of the deceased was located right inside the front door. There was a little bit of intervention there as the local police department responded to the scene. The body was actually just inside the front door where they made entry. When I first got there, the victim was still on the floor. There had been an attempted medical intervention.
But all efforts to resuscitate Patrick Gilhuley have failed, his injuries too numerous and catastrophic.
It's too late. Patrick is dead. He's right there in the entryway, lying dead on the floor.
He received 5 gunshots in total. 2 entered his back and exited out his chest. Both of those perforated his lungs, which would cause substantial distress relatively quickly. There would be a lot of internal bleeding. His chest cavity as well as his lungs would start to fill with blood. He had an entrance wound at the back of the right tricep that exited out the right bicep. That just passed through muscle and bone. He had another graze injury to the back of his neck. That didn't go into him. It just basically struck the surface of his skin and then continued on. And lastly, he had another graze wound in the webbing of his right hand.
At the back of the property, Virginia is unsuspecting of police presence.
They find in the kitchen this woman kneeling on the ground and she's on the phone. She has called 911, but not right away. It took her 25 minutes before she called 911.
So the suspect in this case, Ms. 𝗿𝗏𝗏𝗏, she was unaware that 911 had been notified and that the police were already responding. And she had waited, I believe it was approximately 20 minutes or maybe even a little bit more, before she picked up the phone to dial 911 herself to give her account or to report this. As she was dialing the phone, or maybe had just connected, the local police came through the door. So her timing was off immediately on her story.
Virginia wasted no time in telling her side of the story to police.
Virginia tries to lay out, essentially, a self-defense claim. She tries to use spousal abuse syndrome, that she was in such a toxic relationship, such an abusive relationship, that as a result, this was her only choice, that it was either kill or be killed.
One of the first things that officers came across was the murder weapon discarded at the bottom of the stairs.
The murder weapon was a 6-shot revolver, a .38 caliber firearm, so it's capable of firing 6 shots.
I think the pistol had been recovered by the responding officers laying on either the first or second step. She had laid the gun there.
But this wasn't just any gun. It was Patrick Gilhuley's first service gun, a prized possession.
Policemen, they love when they retire to keep mementos of a career and a career of service. We like to keep our old badges, our first badge that we were pinned on, not a copy of it. We want the real thing, the badge. In Patrick's case, what was his memento? What was the one thing he cherished? He cherished his service revolver. He cherished his handgun that he had, that he carried when he was a brand new policeman.
So why would it be in Virginia's possession?
Later, Virginia says, Patrick gave it to me here. He brought it to me and said, look, I know you're worried and you need protection, so keep it here.
Virginia claims that Patrick himself gave his most prized possession, his service revolver, because he was fearful that Virginia needed some self-protection and that he was, quote, temporarily loaning it to her. It was on loan to her. Now, we're talking about a guy who is sometimes a paid bodyguard, somebody who certainly had enough access to weapons and money for weapons. Why would he choose his most prized possession, his service weapon, and give that to Virginia? It makes no sense.
And there was more to raise the suspicions.
She, remember, has said, he's been beating me. He was beating me. He was attacking me. He was coming after me. He was hitting me. He was going to grab the gun. How could that be when Patrick has been making phone calls? He's called his daughter 3 times in that few minutes that this attack was going on. 3 times. How could he be on the phone with his daughter, protecting himself, and still be beating her? How could that be?
In this case, the defense tried to assert the fact that he was coming up at her. And one of their big issues was the break in the window of the storm door, claiming that the victim was the aggressor and forcibly entered the house and was coming towards her up the stairs.
Remember when she tells police that Patrick was so angry when he runs in the door, he slams the door and the glass shatters in the door? Well, sure enough, the glass in the door is shattered, but it's shattered with a bullet.
The inconsistency of the storm door was one among many. Police were also puzzled by Patrick's phone.
When we got there, his phone was in his pocket. It was actually a flip phone, and it had been closed up and was back in his pocket, which we knew that could not have happened.
Virginia's story simply didn't add up. Why had she waited so long to call 911? What had she been thinking?
I think it was pretty clear she probably had a moment of, I don't want to say clarity, but maybe clarity to the point where she realized she had just killed him, and she needed to start putting things in order for some sort of story to tell the police. In other words, he's here, he's dead, he's not going anywhere. I'm sure not going to move him. I'm going to have to come up with something here. And she started to fabricate her story right from the beginning.
To Virginia's ex-husband, it was a story which was all too familiar.
There was definitely a parallel between Patrick Gilhuley when he tried to leave and when I tried to leave Virginia. It really was, the similarities were the same.
Virginia was a woman with a history of abandonment. Now it would be for a jury to decide whether Patrick Gilhuley died at the hands of a woman scared for her life, or one who simply couldn't handle rejection. At the heart of her case would be that she had been the victim of an attack by Patrick. She'd need evidence that she'd been manhandled. But would the jury believe her? Virginia Vattetas has been charged with the murder of Patrick Gilhuley. She claims self-defense, but prosecution say she simply didn't want him to leave her. This was a woman who'd been left too many times before.
Her father, her 3 husbands, and now Patrick. This is number 5. It's happening again, and she wasn't going to let it happen.
Can you just call my ex-husband and tell him what's going on?
Yep, everybody's been notified.
It would not be long before detectives had sufficient evidence to piece together what they believed had gone on inside the property.
One of the first things we look for in a shooting scene are any identifiable marks from projectiles impacting things other than maybe the victim. And they were located within the stairwell, confines of the stairwell from the 1st to 2nd floor, as well as in the walls in the foyer on the 1st floor, the front hallway.
What happens is You marry up the bloodstain evidence at the scene, the physical evidence in the way of the bullets and the bullet strikes and the impact, and the wounding that occurred to Mr. Gilhuley, and you form a reconstruction, essentially, of the events that transpired during the actual shooting event, more or less from start to finish.
It was that reconstruction which would form the basis of the prosecution in court, and it was a job they took very seriously.
I'm not working against that woman. I'm not working against that defense attorney. I'm working for the dead. I work for the dead. He's gone. Somebody has to speak for him. We are the medical examiners, the crime scene investigators, the detectives. We're the people that have to speak for the dead. And we got to take whatever they're telling us, put it in a nice package, and tell it to the jury.
In court, Virginia Vitetis stuck to her story.
The defense tells the jury this was a clear case of domestic abuse. This was kill or be killed. Either she took him out or he was going to take her out. That was her choice, and she made it. It was self-defense. The prosecution says, oh no, we can show you why that isn't true.
Painstaking forensic examinations and detailed ballistic reports provided a clear picture of the critical timeline.
So in the seconds leading up to the actual shooting, they both would have likely been in an area of the bedroom, which was at the top of the stairway. There's a small landing. As Mr. Gilhuley would have left the bedroom, or at least been in that hallway portion at the top of the small landing.
And what does Virginia do with that? She runs back to her bedroom, and from underneath the mattress she pulls out the one thing that Patrick would have cherished, and that's his own service revolver.
After she retrieved the firearm, Mr. Gilhuley attempted to leave the residence by going down a flight of stairs. As he makes his way around a small railing at the top of the stairway to head down the steps, it would have given Ms. Vitetis the opportunity to also be in that same area, an elevated area.
One shot, two shot. She unloads the gun onto Patrick, who tactically, like any officer would know, is at total disadvantage.
She fired at him 6 times while he wasn't even looking at her. And that was one of the things we had to deal with, was them saying, no, he's coming at her. No, he's not. And we were able to prove it. He was unsuspecting of the gunfire until it started. From that point, he was defenseless. He was wounded, and he ended up on the floor dead. And she fired until there was no more bullets in that weapon to fire. She fired every round she had.
Were my parents called?
That I don't know.
Virginia's claim that Patrick was coming for her was effectively rubbished.
Where do they live?
In Florida.
Florida?
They'll be on a plane right up here.
He's shot in the back. He's moving down the stairwell, or at least he's facing away from her when he is shot multiple times in the back. Because he can't move laterally, her target is confined. It's almost trapped in the stairwell. It's in a fatal funnel, as we call it. There's nowhere for him to go.
Officers drew jurors' attention to Virginia's hit rate, significantly higher than they would expect from a woman fearful for her life.
When you have a shooting such as this, with such a high hit rate, it's an indicator to us that the threat level to the shooter is not as high. They're in control of the weapon. They're in control of the situation. They are able to put the weapon up on target, get target acquisition, and their marksmanship ultimately is better.
Jim Faulkner, too, was disbelieving.
To saying that she never fired a weapon in her life, and to get 4 out of 6 bullseyes in the back, it's pretty good for somebody that never shot a weapon before.
Virginia swore under oath that Patrick had given her the gun, but one of his daughters approached the prosecution to say that was untrue.
And when asked why, she says, because several months after she said she got the weapon, I was at my father's house, and he was showing me some of his old NYPD items, and he showed me that pistol, and we even talked about it. So obviously, you know, the prosecutor asked, well, do we have any proof of this? And she actually had a photo on her phone dated that day of her and her father with some of the NYPD memorabilia. And the following day, that daughter was put on the witness stand.
Bit by bit, specialists disproved Virginia's version of events.
My role in this particular case was to show that, in fact, the bullet was the first impact to that storm door.
We swung that door multiple times, as hard as we physically could, and it did not break. It just did not. It waffled, it vibrated like it's supposed to do, but it did not break.
The blood transference solved the mystery of Patrick's cell phone.
She put the phone in his pocket, and somehow she got his blood on her during that contact transfer of the blood. And some of it ended up on her clothes as well.
Most powerful of all were the calls Patrick had made to his daughter Jennifer and his final words.
And he says, holy blank, she's got a gun and she's gonna... Shot, shot, shot.
Patrick Gilhuley, a former NYPD detective, a famed bodyguard to the stars, put a lot of bad guys and bad girls away during his career in law enforcement. And it would be his own words, his last phone call, that helps solve his own murder.
I'm gonna find out if he's okay.
The prosecution was in no doubt. Virginia 𝗿𝗏𝗃 had killed Patrick Gilhuley in cold blood.
Okay? I don't want to give you wrong information.
I believe it was a murder, a flat-out murder. I believe she intended to shoot the gun. It's not an area where she let one round go. She fired the weapon completely empty, and she fired at her target, and she hit it 5 out of 6 times. So this was an intentional shooting, which resulted in his murder.
The jury thought the same. Virginia 𝗿𝗏𝗃 was found guilty of the murder of Patrick Gilhuley and sentenced to 30 years in prison.
Virginia's convicted of first-degree murder. She could have gotten up to 50 years in prison. Instead, she gets 30 years. That's the minimum sentence under the charge of first-degree murder. The judge, when he's announcing the sentence, says that he's considering her age. She's 55 years old at the time.
Patrick was killed by a woman who had a long history of abandonment issues.
And when it looks like he has made the decision and he's going to leave her, she decides she can't let it happen, and she does something about it.
And once that buzzer, that red flag went up in her mind that, wow, they're really leaving me, then whatever governor she had that made sense flew off her, and there was no rules after that.
Find out if he's okay.
From childhood to adulthood, the men in her life had abandoned her. Virginia 𝗿𝗏𝗃 truly felt she was a scorned woman.
So really, at the end of the day, when I heard all the information and after the trial, I realized that, in my opinion, those 5 bullets were for those 5 alpha males in her life that rejected her and abandoned her. Her father, her first husband, her second husband, her third husband, myself, and Patrick. And each one of those bullets were emotional and intentional.
It's a dream. It's meant to be a dream. You can't be happy.
It is a speed limit enforcement of 100 kilometers ahead of about 400 meters. It is a speed limit enforcement of 100 kilometers ahead of about 200 meters.